Before I begin, I think there's a bit of a construct here because the commission was created by the Premier and Cabinet in November and but is an independent body, five Nova Scotians. So Irene D'Entremont, entrepreneur from Yarmouth, Dan Christmas, senior advisor at Member 2, all well-known folks, Susanna Fuller, the Ecology Action Centre, and John Bragg, as well from Oxford Frozen Foods. And the set, I think, of the commission, which is what I'm going to try to address first, is a challenge that I think we face as a province. I think many other provinces face it. There's some nuances that I want to try to pull out around the Nova Scotia dynamic. But let me set it this way before I supply the data to make the same argument. But this is the part that's really grabbed me. And you can use a variety of ways of conceptualizing this. The one that works best for me, those that were fans of Jim Collins' Good to Great, is the Stockdale paradox. So the Vietnam-era officer, POW, facing torture, just a horrific situation, and he mentally coped with that by saying, I'm going to look it square in the face, I'm going to absolutely deal with what I have to deal with, so much so that when I get on the other side of it, which he absolutely believed he would, that he wouldn't trade not having that experience in terms of his life and development. I can't really wrap my head around Stockdale and the courage and power it took to do that, but I do see an analog in our circumstance. So let me give you the short version. If you take Nova Scotia today, with all of its wonderful strengths, all of its challenges, and then try to walk it forward 10 or 20 years, you're literally placed in a vice. So this is the thing that I believe we cannot afford to avert our gaze from. The vice has two jaws, one demographic, which we'll walk you through in a moment, the other economic, which we'll walk you through in a moment, but the two of them have the potential to really put us in a place that the spirit of this conference, I think, would find anathema. We would just say we don't want to go there, and that's why I believe we need to stare it in the face. And while I've never asked the question explicitly, I think that's why the commission was created, was to engage Nova Scotians in a conversation. If we don't want that outcome, then how do we get on a different track that produces a different outcome? So let me support what I've just said with a couple of data sets. First of all, the mandate, two pieces in the mandate. One is to actually do a public engagement process, which we're through the first tranche of now. Over 50 individual meetings, I think 14 in communities, so public open sessions. Try to get into a sense of individual parts of the province. We have a particular focus. We're pan-provincial in mandate, but a particular focus on rural Nova Scotia. And then we've got to file a report to provide our best advice. And I'll say to you what I've said to every community. Within a half an hour of the commission meeting for the first time, we all looked at each other and said, the track record of royal commissions and panels in Canada is not really great. They produce a lot of reports that gather dust. And we're going to do everything humanly possible to make sure our report doesn't meet that fate. Check in later, it may still, but we're trying to do this in a way that is decidedly actionable and that by the end of the process, it won't be the Commission's report. If it works properly, we will have a groundswell of Nova Scotian thought and hopefully Nova Scotians who say there is another path for us to follow. So let's dive into the data. We've affectionately called this the bucket of ice water because that's the way it feels when it hits you in the face. And so let's get the first part. This is population change in Nova Scotia 01 to 11. Again, I'm going to have to go very quickly. So green is good, red is bad. So the only places growing in Nova Scotia are within an hour's drive of Halifax and Antigonish County, thanks to St. FX. But elsewhere, we've lost population in the recent past. So that's starting to set the stage, but it gets worse. So now let's walk out 25 years in Nova Scotia. So if you walk out 25 years, you'll see the province as a whole, and this is not, I want to underscore this, this is not a worst case scenario. This is kind of a mid-level projection. So the province goes down about 4 to 5%. You'll see double-digit numbers in certain areas, my home, Cape Breton, being one of them. The only place showing any growth is HRM. Again, this is a flash of insight into the obvious for most people in the room. I think we know this is occurring. The scale may surprise you a bit. And, you know, given the topic of innovation today and our consideration of where our economy will be, we all know what that kind of compression will mean. Municipal politicians, as we meet with them, get this calculus exquisitely. You've got higher demand for services and fewer people paying for those services. Not a great combination. It gets worse. So there's the real kicker. The compression in the labor market varies at about twice the rate of the compression in the overall population. So if your population declines by 5%, you get about a 10% compression in the 18 to 64-year-old age cohort. So anybody in the audience that's running their own business will do that math very, very quickly, and you will come to the conclusion, and that's why there's two jaws to this vice, because, look, I know some of you may be saying, yeah, Canada is one of the most urbanized countries on the planet, which is absolutely true. This pattern is occurring everywhere in the Western world. That would be true. The scale of the compression, because of our unique demography in Atlantic Canada, is different here. And this is one jaw of the vice that my view is we absolutely need to stare square in the eye because there's no escaping unless another track is developed. You can quibble whether it'll be 8 or 10%, that's fine by me, but on scale, you're dealing with a hugely constraining factor for the Nova Scotia we want to have. And you can look at this in economic terms, or you can easily look at it in quality of life terms, services you want to have in your community. I'd argue the social fabric you want to have as a province is all put at risk because of this. So the next piece is just, look, these are 3 periods of the Nova Scotia economy. And many people in the room, just judging by looking out there, were in the province at the same time, because I was. If you think back, 90 to 97, we had the federal government dealing with its deficit problems. We had the downturn in the fishery, and we saw Nova Scotia caught in one of those very typical for the last number of decades patterns of about 1 to 2% GDP growth. We then go to 97 to 03, which for me in my lifetime in Nova Scotia, that was the only time where we really did have the rising tide raising all ships. We had an uptick across the economy, all sectors, and growth, if remember, the average over that period was about 3.7% GDP. And then in 03 to 09, we kind of came off that. The dollar strengthened, which is one of the factors. We also hit the wall in the 08 period. So we're back into, again, that 1 to 2% range. All I want to say to set the other jaw in the vice is simply this, that with that amount of labor market compression and economic performance in that band, let's call it the 1 to 2, even go up to 3% GDP, you can't square the circle. There's not enough efficiency, productivity gains, if you look at historical patterns, that you're going to be able to make up for even just the labor market compression alone. So I want to be clear about this because I need to represent my fellow commissioners. We are suggesting that we all stare this directly in the eye, not to capitulate to it, not to say that this consigns us to that fate, simply to make the assertion that if we don't get on a fundamentally different track as a province and as individual communities, we're going to get an outcome that's somewhere in that, that broad area, and none of it is what we would want. Now, again, the work of the Commission will be to not capitulate to that and to fight it. So let's talk a little bit about how that may occur. So on the public consultations, let me tell you a bit about what we heard. And these are my reflections. I do not want to entrain either the commissioners, nor do I want to at all appropriate or disrespect what we heard from various communities. I want to underscore a bit of what I took away. One is there is tremendous value, lots of good literature written on social capital, but people who live particularly in rural Nova Scotia because they feel more of a threat to their community, however they define that. There is a tremendous, tremendous pride of place and a tremendous resolve. And if you think of our history, long before Confederation, there were many pundits of the day who predicted that many of those communities would meet their demise in the coming years, and they're still there in different forms, obviously, and the adaptation theme, which runs through innovation, is appropriate in this case. But one of the reasons that some of these communities are going to survive and succeed is because they passionately and desperately want to. And we need to find ways to align all of our work so that it supports that. Here's the other piece, and this one has probably been one of my biggest takeaways, and JP actually alluded to it. There has not been a community or part of the province that we've been in that we haven't identified, either met with, talked to, visited, individual, at the firm level, individual businesses that are absolutely, and again, you know, this has been so overused, but are competing on a world stage. I won't say world class, competing on a world stage. They meet every criteria, whether they were located here or Waterloo or Silicon Valley. You just say first-rate company, generating wealth, competing successfully. We need more of them, right? They're there in 1s and 2s and 3s, or in bigger communities, they're there in 10s and 15s. Every time I've driven out, I've been saying, what would it be like if there were 50, right? And if you think about the scale of the Nova Scotia economy, it's probably useful. Let's go back to that period where we saw an uptick in 97 to 03 across the entire sector, all the sectors. Do you know two things drove that in the main? I mean, you can argue a low Canadian dollar, but a longer conversation around that. But we had the Sable project coming up to full stream, and we had the big paper mill project in Port Hawkesbury. Our economy, we're less than 1 million people. Our economy is of a size and scale that two projects of that ilk can actually directly show up on a GDP basis. So the scale, look, there's the law of large numbers and there's also the law of small numbers, right? We have a scale here that if we can get a couple of pieces right, you'll see essentially for us, if you were thinking about GDP, bottom line performance that can have that rising tide raises all ships phenomenon. So it's a piece that the scale issue is one that continues to loom large in my head. There's concerns in communities, and I think rightly so, around the tipping point. And you saw that manifested in the public debate in the past 6 months, primarily around schools, but it extends beyond schools. Look, communities are smart. They know what their assets are, and they know what the gaps are. They also know if you pull out a linchpin piece, whatever that might be, a bunch of other pieces follow after it. And you have to, I'm pleased that they're concerned about this, because you can't have one element missing and then say, but you should have something that depends on that element 3 steps down the road. It just doesn't work that way. And I think they understand it doesn't work that way. Now, some difficult decisions need to be made. Some creativity needs to be shown in terms of how communities make the trade-offs that allow that to occur. But again, I took heart from the fact that that's as prominent as it is. A huge focus on human capital, broadly defined. They understand, again, if we can go to the theme of this conference, that intellectual capital is important, that the oat migration issue in many ways does relate to skills, talent, knowledge, resident within being able to be put to use or being put to use elsewhere. They also recognize, and again, I know the audience will quickly go, yes, you can't solve that demographic issue without levels of immigration we have not seen in Nova Scotia for at least 100 years. That is true. The communities understand that as well. There's an uneven capacity for community leadership. I mean, I suppose we can say that anywhere, in any community or in any organization. Some communities are better prepared to go. And look, I'll just pick one dimension of this. I honestly think, with all due respect, and I think you know, many government officials would feel the same way, the answers for whether it's Glace Bay or whether it's Amherst are likely to be found in those communities rather than from somewhere else, Halifax included. And so the locus of the community vision has to come from the community. It just absolutely must. So community capacity and leadership is an important element. Getting alignment in terms of policy and other issues is the work of government, but to my mind, the genesis must begin at the community level. The last one, and this, again, for the native Nova Scotians, at least in the room that have been around a long time, this is not unimportant that yesterday the Mayor of Halifax and the Mayor of Sydney, CBRM, spent time together talking about potential partnerships. Look, the major political dialectic in Nova Scotia in my lifetime has been Halifax versus the rest of the province. I think we're finally naming that because it wasn't always easy to talk about. Now we can. And we're making progress on it. Like most problems, when you finally can talk about them openly, you see pathways to solutions that weren't there previously. I think this bodes well. I've been saying, perhaps at my own peril, in meetings in far-flung places in this province, that the best thing for the people gathered in the room, no matter where we are, is that Halifax succeeds wildly. And I absolutely believe that. And so do those communities, frankly. Their only caveat is, it can't mean an abandonment of the rest of the province. I think that's actually a fair social compact, and I think we need to develop it as far as we can. Let me just go to another sphere here, and this is, look, I'm just a couple of quick ones, and I'm constrained on time, on the innovation piece. First is, and again, this is ERDT data, and I thank them for producing it. And this is just, look, the amount of that's been invested, new or improved process, actually uptake on it. New or improved processes and products in the past 2 years, and on the x-axis is the company size, and then the percentage on the y-axis. And you basically see a pattern that exists right across Canada. The larger the company, the more you see them investing in new or improved products. If you look at R&D specifically, again, not unlike the rest of the country, it varies by company size. I had the data but didn't want to clutter this slide. The thing you'll find interesting is the data in Halifax proper versus the rest of the province shows exactly the same pattern, right? So a little bit of variability on the high end, as you would expect, but exactly the same pattern. Let's go to educational attainment. This may or may not surprise you, but I'm going to turn the corner here and tell you why I remain optimistic about our ability to make some progress on this issue of economic growth, even in the face. Remember, look it square in the eye, but with a steely resolve that we're going to get past it. And here's some reasons why. Our educational attainment levels in Nova Scotia rank second in the country, and this is all post-secondary credentials per 10,000, I think, of population. I can't quite see that, but I think it's 10,000 of population. So let's go back to the map, because there is some variability geographically. So this one is percentage of Nova Scotians aged 25 to 64 without secondary school completion. And again, green is good, red is not good. And, you know, so, okay, you can look at this in a variety of ways. Again, around Halifax is a bit different, so is Antigonish County. But I'll say a couple of things here. One is, and I hope Sandra McKenzie is here in the room, because she was one of the people that created the Nova Scotia School for Adult Learning, and this data would have looked significantly worse even 15 to 20 years ago than it does today. And it's a great example of innovation within government, because when we finally put a different vehicle in place, we started to chip away at these numbers. And secondly, they're incredibly age-weighted. So, you know, an older population where we still have that issue, it's not as much of a problem as we go with the younger population. But let's walk through this. Next one is, this is percentage of Nova Scotians aged 25 to 64 with a post-secondary certificate, diploma, or degree. Now again, it's not quite green is good and red is bad, because even if you look at the lowest areas, we're well above 50%, and that number's climbing rapidly as the older group would have the higher concentration of non-completion come out of the labor market and the younger group come in. So we're moving through this as a community. Now, let's go here, and now we're going to add a postgraduate degree, and that does change things. So the green is good in this case. We don't even have red. It pretty much goes quickly to white. Halifax is a hot spot, as you would expect, but so is Antigonish County, a little bit down in Kings. And the point here is there are a lot of well-educated people throughout this province. It is a massive asset that we have the potential to tap into. And the innovation ecosystem, and I love that way of thinking about it, and JP underscored, is alive and well in Nova Scotia. So let's go to the next slide. And there is a lot of, and I saw Stephen Lund this morning coming in, he will tell you that a lot of the location that occurs, we heard that to some degree from the folks from IBM last night on their big data initiative, and that is they came here knowing that they had the partnership with the institutions, but also they had the people in the population that they could access that had very high level skills. So let's just, look, this is a map, and I don't have time to go through all of them, so I'm just going to cherry pick a few if you'll allow me. I'll start with JP's company, which, well, offices in Dartmouth. JP, you've got quite a presence in rural Nova Scotia, and creatively using seaweed as a source product. I think you're now in 6 or 8 different countries, 300 plus employees. I mean, we're talking a significant business. And look, I'll say this as a native Nova Scotian. I think we would look at JP's company differently if we were sitting in Toronto or Calgary or BC. For some reason in Nova Scotia, we don't hold up our entrepreneurs that are massively successful and celebrate them in a way that I believe we're going to need to if we're going to make this kind of conversion. Because if the successful ones are successful, they'd be successful anywhere. It's great that they're here, and we need more of them. You'll get that theme from me over and over. Let's jump to a couple of others. I mean, one, look, this is just a personal one, so I've got to get it out. I think, excuse me, I think Highliner is one of the top business success stories in Canada in the last 50 years, right? And anybody that questions that, go talk to Henry and talk about what it was like when you're basically a fishing company and you lose your access to fish. And now you're the top value-added seafood processor in North America. So, you know, their revenues last year were, I believe, $900 million. They'll go over the billion mark this coming year simply because of the acquisition of the Icelandic company, consortium. Just massive success story, and guess what? The home is Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. So I see Noel down there, Comeau Seafoods in Saulnieville and a couple of Yarmouth, a couple of locations. Again, company growing, well diversified in fish harvesting and processing. And food value-added products, and I'll put a plug in anybody that hasn't tried their seafood spreads. They've got a number of them that they've launched in the past year or so. Try them. Again, if you bought them in New York City, you'd be coming back here saying, wow, I wish we could get access to that kind of product here in Nova Scotia. The product's made in Nova Scotia, right? And there's just stories like that in Nova Scotia from one end to the other. I'll use a couple from the Valley that, since it's home for me now, you know, I think that the Honeycrisp conversion in the fruit growing industry in this province is horribly, horribly overlooked. I mean, to go essentially from commodity pricing with Macintosh, and this one, you want the innovation ecosystem, if I can, Martha, this one I believe is a case study of the innovation ecosystem. Della's here. The Fruit Growers Association made a really smart move back in '96. They saw the opportunity. They had the Ag Research Station in Kentville, the Ag College in Truro. Acadia was involved as well. They threw a lot of research at solving some real problems around making the Honeycrisp work in the way that it has in the Nova Scotia climate. The federal government came in with support that aligned well with what the industry wanted to do. So did the province. They came in on the replant program, I believe, and boom. So the bin revenues have increased by a factor of 5. By a factor of 5. Going from a commodity apple to a high-value apple, and then now outcompeting the best apple growing regions in the U.S. So the whole ecosystem there, it clicked into place as elegantly as I can remember seeing it. The one that I think is emerging, and I see Dr. Sean Miles here, is the grape growing and wine industry. Still in a developmental phase, but I think history will show, because I believe the pieces of the ecosystem have been locked together nicely, history will show that we'll compress the developmental period for the Annapolis Valley region and Nova Scotia wines generally as compared to the Okanagan and the Niagara, because we built a research capacity in support of the industry. The Nova Scotia Community College is involved as well on the skills development side of this. Those pieces have fallen in place, again, industry-led, and the other pieces coming in to actually fit the need. So we could go right around the province on that map with all kinds of examples. I don't have time. I wish I did, and my apologies on that. Look, next steps for us, and basically the design of the commission, if people didn't get this when it was announced, we'll have an interim report out within the next number of weeks. But the design of the commission is our final report is not designed to occur, and it will not, until after the upcoming provincial election, whenever that occurs. So whoever forms the next government will be the ones that will receive the report. I think that's actually a smart piece of conceptualizing the work, because it gets it out of the political realm and will gladly give whoever forms the next government our best advice. Let me make two comments to close. One is, while I just cited two examples that I think are shining exemplars of the ecosystem falling into place and working well, this is a personal comment, and as someone who spent most of my life in Nova Scotia, I rate our province much, much higher on having the requisite pieces of that ecosystem in terms of universities, NSCC, NRC, governments playing policy roles. I rate us much higher on having the requisite pieces than I do on actually building a true ecosystem where those requisite pieces work together hand in glove. It's just, I think, it's another one that I think we just need to call. And lots of historical reasons for that, but let's get past it, and let's get past it in a hurry. Because one of the things about an ecosystem, and there are a lot of biologists in the room that know this far better than I, but you start missing one piece or one niche in an ecosystem, and it's not just that piece that's damaged, it's the entire system. And so that piece we've got to get, I think we've got to get developed in a hurry. I see lots of signs that I'm quite optimistic about, but it's one, if I could turn the dial up in terms of the rapidity to get there, I would. The second is we have to do more. I want to go back again to the scale issue. It's not the qualitative problem. It's not like you can do a diagnostic and say, there's the missing piece. But what you see over and over again is where we have 5, we need 10. Where we have 10, we need 25. And I honestly believe, again, to put a plug in as I conclude for the theme of this conference, I honestly don't see any way to get there without passing through the portal of the entrepreneurship innovation relationship being a key to that. Because not only will we get more in terms of gross numbers, we'll add greater value along the way. Thank you very much.